the first thing that I said, you know what, who do I need to link up with? What do we need to do in terms of coming together to really make some changes in our community? Because you know what happened there, kids did it. You had two 15-year-olds. You had people who needed help. Well, are we really providing the protection and help for all of our children? Because it could have easily been a black kid.
And I think factually, we also had at least one, if not two, undocumented adults.
I was looking at that conversation.
And Maurice, one of the things, as you mentioned, framing this whole discussion, I was watching CNN last night, and the entire story was about this one person, undocumented worker who turned himself in. And it seems like this is being used as a way to shine the spotlight in a negative sense on this whole immigration debate.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right. And that is an issue, but is that the main issue? There's another piece of it, and that is, from what I understood, to be the failure of the court system to be stringent in terms of denying bail to this person who I understand has been indicted for other offenses, including sexual assault. And so I think if we're going to really understand the situation, and Derek, as you were saying, we can't just point the finger at one entity.
Yeah.
As far as I see it, it was a system failure. So you got to look at every aspect of the system. How about the parent of the 15-year-old young man? How about our immigration policy? How about
our gun policy?
Our gun policy. How about the Newark court system? I mean, all of that came together, or to put it another way, all that broke down, failed in order to produce that tragedy.
But what I'm trying to get at, and this is the thing that's really just messing with me, and it hurt me when I heard about it. I'm trying to wrap my mind around how could you make somebody get down on their knees and shoot them in the back of their head? That is like you have to have so much anger and rage and hate, and for somebody you didn't even know, I just can't understand.
Exactly.
Exactly. I think it goes back to, you said something before you broke into that, like parents being scared of their children.
Right.
And also it goes into stuff these kids see, games they get. You got games that what's that auto theft thing that you take
Grand Theft Auto.
Yeah, you take the guy out there and they show you that on the thing. You sit him down and put a gun behind his head in the little games that you play. So these kids act that out on a game. It's like acting out on real life to some of them. And then we go back to the two adults that was there. We're not even talking about if they're immigrants or not. They still was adults.
Exactly.
With kids.
With kids.
Adults. These are grown men that's with 15-year-olds.
What are you doing with 15-year-olds?
What are you doing with 15-year-olds? What are you doing with these kids? What are you doing? Was that an initiation for these kids to get down with a gang? So all these other things come into play. So when you look at that, you're like, okay, what else? What else is going on with this that happened this way? And these guys think they could get away with it because I'm an immigrant. So you know what? What they're going to do? They're going to slap me on my hand and send me back to my country.
And I'll be back.
And I slip back in.
And you know what? And that brings me to what, and not to defend 50, but 50 did an interview, and he says, listen, you guys are ragging me, okay, about the music, and my song's only 3 minutes. What about the movies that the kids are watching that are 2 hours? What about the video games that they're playing for 4 and 5 hours? So you guys are jumping on hip-hop and rap in terms of what we're doing with our images, and it's only 3-minute songs you're talking about. But you're not talking about the 2-hour stuff, and the kids sitting up there playing video games where they're doing stuff that you're talking about. And that's where I think a lot of that stuff came from, because that's not stuff you see in hip-hop.
I think one of the things that we've got to take seriously is that America is a culture of violence.
Yeah.
It's not only a culture of violence, but violence is interwoven, if I can use that word, into the very fabric of our culture.
That's how
you understand what I'm saying?
It builds a society.
And I mean, I'll stop there because it's easy to get on the soapbox, but we have to, as you're talking about framing the discussion as an African American people, we got to understand this happened in America, which the culture of which is laced with violence that did not originate in our community. You understand what I'm saying? It didn't originate in our community. We don't control it. And it's not to say that there may be violent images in hip-hop. We understand that, but they're not the only images of hip-hop. But I haven't heard anyone say, or I haven't read anything that says, you know what, part of this whole notion of the destruction that happened, the murder, is because in part we live in a culture of violence that somehow perpetuates
that allows that to happen.
That ethic and that value.
And the other thing is, again, here we go with other agendas. Now, Mayor Booker's talking about putting cameras in these so-called high crime areas. I can't stand that. It sounds Orwellian to me. It sounds 1984 to me. I don't believe cameras ever stopped anybody from doing anything, and I don't believe it's going to stop crime. I think you need to put more police on the street. I think you need to start addressing these young people and dealing with them as people instead of as objects or things or as criminals or whatever. And I think that's what the problem is, because people are not having a conversation with the people that are suffering the most. The communities that are suffering the most, there's no conversation going on. You have people that come in those neighborhoods and they're more like occupying forces than they are, you know, people that we consider to be there to protect and serve us.
And what do we do about the whole notion of hopelessness? That there are youth, unfortunately, who feel like there's no hope. Yeah, I may only live till I'm 15, so I'm gonna do whatever the heck I want to do. Yeah, you understand what I'm saying? And how do you how do you transform hopelessness into hope? I think that's a spiritual value, and so I think part of the solution is for spiritual communities to reach out into the community. And I'm far past one religion as being the great religion. Spirituality transcends religion, and to begin to reach out to families with some spiritual teaching to help them understand that there is hope, that there is value for life, that as bad as it gets, you know, part of our history as African American people is we struggled through poverty, but we weren't shooting each other.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? I mean, in some isolated sense, yes, but there's this ethic in our community that we struggled, we were poor, we did what we could to make it happen, but we still maintain our dignity and certain values that perhaps we're losing as a community.
You know, I think a big thing also is, and you're touching on that too, and I think the underlying thing with the community is the fear. Yeah. The community is afraid. So it's like in all these issues that we're talking about, the community needs to come out and, as I say, take back the corners. But it's like the community is afraid. It's afraid to address young people. It's afraid to talk to these young kids today. So when they see these young kids doing things, everybody's turned in their heads. They're afraid to say, you know what, listen, that's not what you do.
Right.
So it's like, how do we get the community to kind of like step up and not be afraid of our own kids?